In this episode, we are joined by Romeo High School to explore how an academy model can create more personalized, pathway-driven experiences for students. I'm joined by Jennifer McFarlane, who shares how their model evolved from an early idea into a fully built, CTE-aligned system focused on student engagement and real-world outcomes. We talked through the structural shifts behind the work, the challenges along the way, and the impact they're seeing, including improved graduation rates and fewer course failures. Jennifer also offers practical advice for school leaders considering similar efforts, from defining a clear North Star to centering teacher voice and stakeholder buy-in. If you're thinking about academy models or reimagining the high school experience, this conversation is worth your time. Let's check it out. So enjoy your ride to or from school, your run on the treadmill, or however you like to listen, because another MASSP podcast episode starts now. All right. Well, Jennifer, thanks so much for being on the MASSP podcast with me today. I know we've had a chance to really kind of showcase and hear about the academies at Romeo over the last year or two. We had a group come to a site visit with you all last year as part of year one of our Innovative Leaders Network. And then you had a chance to also share out some of the amazing things you're doing at Romeo at EdCon this last year. So excited to be able to kind of bring what you are doing to the podcast world for our MASSP listeners. But thank you so much for taking time to be with me today.
Thanks for the invite, Ryan. Always excited to share about what we're doing in Romeo.
Awesome. So let's get right into it. I really want to learn more about the academies at Romeo. So can you just take us through kind of what does that model look like? And if you can even shed some light along the way in terms of like why you are going to that model. In other words, was there a certain problem or something that you were trying to address by kind of making this shift?
Sure. So I started in Romeo in 2015-2016 school year. So the previous year, who was in my role, who became the superintendent, was looking at different models to consider. We had two campuses. So we had our main campus high school on 32 Mile, and then we had a Romeo Engineering and Technology Center, which housed many of our CTE programs, not all, but many of them. And kids could stay there for 3 hours or a full day. So we had staff, English, math, science, social science teachers that had to be there. And I believe at the time they had a science and math kind of pocket academy. So we had outgrown the high school building. So they built that and had kids take classes over there. A very inefficient staffing and scheduling, kids traveling between the day. So the superintendent had looked into how do we increase the students taking career and technical education classes. We had really good programs. Not everybody accessed it. Along the same time, they were going out for a bond initiative. Actually, it was in November of 2016, but they were planning it beforehand to build onto the RETSI to make it a comprehensive high school and kind of eliminate some of the challenges of students driving during the midday and going between buildings. The Nashville study visits started occurring. So Nashville Public Schools, they're probably in year 25 now, I think, for the wall-to-wall academy model. We had a person who lives in our community whose kids went through our school system become a Ford Next Generation Learning Coach. Scott Palmer. So he started working with the district and just envisioning what might be different for our kids. You talk about what problem were we trying to solve. We had about 80% of our kids go to college post-high school, but only about 40% were completers after 6 years. So it's even 2-year certification or a 4-year degree. That's a lot of money out the door. We worked with our Planning and Economic Development Department in Macomb County and talked about the needs of our employers in the county. We have really great advanced manufacturing, lots of defense suppliers in the county. And how could we help our students learn about those careers, connect with business partners to see what it was like? In Nashville, one of our former community coaches talked about, kids need to see it, smell it, and hear it, right? You need to go in there and see what it's like. We had low, I shouldn't say low, our graduation rate wasn't where it should be for our socioeconomic status. So we had lots of kids that were just going to high school because they felt like they needed to, or their parent was moving them, saying, you got to go to school, you got to go to school. I think when you look at the disengagement of our kids at that time, we looked at the National Gallup study as well, right around there. Because a lot of the high school teachers, we were doing well, they felt, right? So we talked about some of the data, the college completion rate, our graduation rate compared to like schools. We talked about the engagement of students or disengagement of students. Why do I have to learn this?
Yep.
So that kind of led us down the path of really working with Ford NGL to create a community connected plan. So it's not just a school improvement plan or a district improvement plan. Our business partners were at the table talking about what their needs were. Higher institution, colleges and universities were at the table talking about what they needed kids to enter college with. Students, parents, faculty, tons of people were at the table to kind of talk about what was our new vision for Romeo School.
Awesome. So can you walk us through a little bit then? So what does what does that model then look like for students, and maybe even like what does it look like for the teachers that are part of the academy? And then I want to get into a little bit based on, how long you really have been doing this and what kind of changes have you seen from students or parents or teachers, and some of those maybe statistics, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. But
Sure.
I mean, just kind of start with, what does it look like? So if I'm a student that's participating in the academy, what does that look like?
Yeah. So with Ford Next Generation Learning, they can kind of give you a roadmap, right? When we first started, we were one of the first single high school towns to jump on board and go through this master planning process. Many had, 3, 5. Nashville has 12 comprehensive high schools. Knox County has 14, I believe now. So we were kind of we were in front. We were the pioneers, so to say, of what it would look like to plan for one high school. So Ford NGL, in their history of working with communities, 9th grade academy was the first one, right? So how do you get your 9th graders to understand, number one, what their interests are currently, what their strengths are, what they feel like at 14, right? What they're interested in. We use Zello. I'm sure other districts may use it, or some other kind of, career exploration platform. So we just used to do that, right? But we really engage more now with our 9th graders. So in 9th grade, they're in a separate building on the same campus as our high school. And they are in 3 separate teams. So one thing unique about the academies, we're wall to wall. That means all kids are in an academy. We don't exclude some. It's not a pocket academy, which some schools have, where only certain kids are in that. So it's really the middle school philosophy. I'm going to speak with my middle school principal hat on, but it really is a middle school philosophy of teaming, right? So you have your 4 core content area teachers and some elective teachers that share the same students. And so in 9th grade, they really just share the students. There's not any particular theme to it, but they do a lot of high school 101. How do I learn to study? Credits matter. What does this look like? How do I stay prepared for tests ahead of time? And then they do a lot of robust career exploration. Our 9th graders visit Career Quest in Novi. So we have 440 of them, traveling on 12 buses or 13 up to Novi. That's fun. We do a 2-year college visit to Macomb Community College. And then in the spring, they'll go to a 4-year university based on the academy that they select. So right around now, I think they visit our high school next week, I think, because finals are this week. So they go and they've done a lot of exploration around Ford NGL will call it high skill, high wage, multiple off ramps for the pathways. And so the kids kind of do a card sort. When we first started, they literally were baseball cards, but now they're slides because of COVID. You know, we learned how to do things differently.
Yeah.
So they narrow them down to kind of their top 3 choices for a pathway. That's a CTE pathway. So then they'll go visit at the high school. And they'll actually see the class, talk to kids that are currently in a pathway, see kind of what the room looks like, because some are much different. They're not a typical classroom lab. And then they select their pathway. And then in 10th grade, they are either in one of 3 academies: our Health, Human, and Public Service Academy, our Design, Engineering, and Manufacturing Academy, or our Business, Entrepreneurship, and Innovation Academy. And that's dependent on what pathway they're in, CTE class. And so much like 9th grade, we have teams in each of those academies. So we have a 10th grade team, an 11th grade team, and a 12th grade team. Usually it's the English teacher that's constant, and up, 10th, 11th math, and then it gets 12th's a little messy because, 12th grade kids, have a lot of different choices for math and science or social studies and different things like that. So it really is, it's really conducive to supporting students, but also teachers with the kind of schedule that we've built. I think I answered the question.
No, for sure. And quick follow-up. So we started with the 9th grade academy model. Did you then go to 9th and 10th, add in the 10th, and then kind of build it basically that way as you kind of followed that grade level through?
So we also had a time when our building was open. So really, we started with our 9th grade teachers. They were the first out the gate that volunteered to be in the 9th grade academy. And we were still at the old campus, and the teachers just worked together for the year. We weren't even teamed yet, but they did a lot of work with our Ford NGL community coach and really worked on, what does 9th grade need to look like for kids to be successful? Not only academically, but career exploration wise. And then the following year, they actually shared, were teamed and had students assigned to them within teams. Our first graduating class was actually the class of 2022. Okay. So our building didn't open. I want to say it opened in the 18-19 school year. We were designated in September of 2018 by Ford NGL. So it was a process. When we moved into the new building, however, kids like 11th and 12th graders were in an academy, but they weren't necessarily strictly in pathway classes. We just needed to group them because teachers were already in there, and our 10th graders were kind of in their home academy, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So it was a little messy at first, because we really, the class of 22, that's our first graduating class that matriculated all the way through the 9th grade academy, the 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade, as pure, as we could be.
You mentioned, kind of the rationale behind moving to this model, looking at graduation rates, completers, post-secondary completers, just engagement, right? And so have you seen, now that we are, you've had a handful of years of graduating classes now, are we starting to see that this model is working with some of those areas you were focusing on?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So our graduation rate has improved. I think it's for, a variety of reasons, but our high school principal and administrative team, when we first started in the master planning process, created a data dashboard. Kind of what data do we want to collect longitudinally through each cohort. And our graduation rate has increased. We're 96% or more. I think that's for a couple of reasons. But it's interesting. The percentage of students who enter college is a little less than what it was prior. But I think a lot of our kids go right into the workforce.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
I can think of two students who went right into an advanced manufacturing job,
Oh,
and we're making probably about $10,000 more than our starting teacher.
yeah,
And and the manufacturing company will pay for their college,
yeah,
whether it be a 2 or 4 year
that's
degree.
a
So
great pathway.
um, yeah, our math failure rate has lowered. That was a key, kind of
Awesome.
data indicator internally that we continued to focus on. So I think there's some relevancy of why kids are learning math now. We're nowhere mean. The Ford NGL network talks about teaching through the lens, but we're moving the needle on that. But it's hard to talk about in geometry if you're in health sciences, kind of how that connects. But
Yeah.
where it does make sense, we try to help kids understand the relevancy of what they're learning to the career that they're currently exploring. I think our completion of students who do enter college is moving the needle. There's a lag
Yeah.
in the data that you can get, but it appears that we're making some progress. Kids are more focused. Our high school principal gives a senior survey in May, and asks the kids, wherever you're headed, if it's a college or a career, are you in the pathway that you spent 3 years in? And about 50% will say yes, and 50% will say no. But we think that's a win.
Yeah.
50%
Yeah.
discovered something that they didn't like, that they didn't enjoy through the experiences and through the content. So we're saving them money if they
Yes.
do go to college, and we're
Yes.
saving them from taking a job that isn't of interest to them. So we think that that's a win as well, even though that wasn't something we thought
Yeah.
about when we started. But we like to talk about the transferable skills. I think they're called durable skills
And
now,
yeah.
soft skill. They
Yeah.
changed the name of them, but we really hope and know that when our students go into meeting people that aren't their teachers or their parents, they have a skill set to be able to communicate effectively with people through the
Absolutely.
experiences that we have within our academy model.
So we're seeing what it sounds like a lot of success in a lot of different areas. Do you think, and it's okay if you can't pinpoint this to one thing, but I'm just curious, like, what do you think the biggest rationale for that is? Is it from these maybe smaller learning environments? Is it
Mm.
based on how you've set up that team teaching approach, or maybe it's PLC time? Is it just that they found that relevancy through that lens, identifying a pathway, like all
Yeah,
these different structural shifts that you've made to the academy model?
right.
Do you think there's one that's really had the biggest impact on that newfound student success? And it's okay if
So
there's not, if it's,
I I I think something unique to the high school are those small learning communities, right? Those teams of teachers. So we're on a block schedule. We're a 4x4, and their semesters, but their core is all year. And so our kids take 8 classes a year. And within that schedule, which it's expensive, right? I was a middle school principal and we lost team time, and we cut 8 staff. So it is expensive, but we gained a lot of efficiency when we went to one campus. So when people said you can't do this, you're going to have to hire 12 teachers, I think we had to hire 4 or 5. And some of it was CTE, pathway teachers. But once a week, teachers, and we negotiated with our teachers union, who were very flexible and understood the importance of this. So once a week, our teams meet in what we call SLCs, which are those small learning communities. So your content area teachers, a CTE teacher, and some elective teachers may be in that SLC, and they talk about students. So think about, as a high school teacher or administrator, time within your schedule to talk about kids, who's doing well, who has absences. And it's 60 minutes because our blocks are 90, but we still wanted them to have a little bit of a prep that day. So we agreed to 60 minutes a week to do that. And I think as far as academic success, I think some of it has to do with those small learning communities really being focused on kids, and they can call kids in during that meeting. Sometimes they call a parent together as a team. Sometimes, they call when the student's in the room with them. And then another day during the week, they have PLC time. So our 10th grade geometry teachers meet once a week for 60 minutes. So there's some tight, kind of curriculum alignment that occurs with that. So I think between those two things, and the structure is the block schedule, and have time for teachers to meet during the day about students and content, I think that's where we see some of the success coming from.
That's awesome. I didn't realize you were doing that 2 times a week, essentially. Then, right, being able to give them time to collaborate. Yep. So that's great. Going back to the community partnerships and a big piece of the Ford NGL model. Obviously, you mentioned you're in a great location geographically in Macomb County to be able to have that. I know some of the concerns that others have are people that live in rural areas. You think about the communities in the UP and just some of these other areas. What typically, and I've had a chance to talk to Scott Palmer about this before, and I know they have creative ways to do that. I mean, what would you advise to a school maybe that has that concern, or like, what have you found from working with those community partnerships? Like, how does that play into this, the success of running an academy?
Yeah. So number one, they have to be involved from the get-go, as far as I'm concerned, of planning this model.
Okay.
Because without their feedback about, what are the job skills that are needed? What are some of the, high skill, high wage, multiple off ramps, right? With no degree, and all the way up to, like, you want to be a doctor, right? I think we were very lucky in the sense we had some pretty strong CTE programs to begin with at RETSI. So we had some community partners. Romeo is also a really great town, and I'm assuming some of the smaller towns, maybe in the UP or up north, may have this same kind of thing. Your alumni come knocking, right? Hey, I know a place, I know a business, or hey, I own my own business. I only have 3 employees, but how can I help? We leaned on our planning and economic development department. We have 7 different communities within Romeo Community Schools, but our chamber of commerce, sometimes they come through. When we first started, they used to have little business roundtables. So, the academy coach and I would go to them and just talk about what we're doing, and people would, hey, here's my card, give me a call. So I think just work any kind of avenue you have. We published in February, CTE month, we published a CTE newsletter, district newsletter. And so that gets mailed to all of our homes. And we have a lot. And I got a cold call from a community member who got it and said, hey, we own our own business. We have an accountant, we have a lawyer, and we have a site developer. Where can we help? So, I think just communicating in avenues that you don't think, and just really finding a purpose for that partner, right? So you can have a list of 250, but if you don't engage them in the process itself, like we started with some partners that we didn't see how they could align, but they're great at doing mock interviews for us, where
Yep.
they might not be a perfect alignment to one of our pathways. They're great about, we did some reverse job shadows where the business partner would come into one of our classrooms and kind of see what school was like,
Yeah. How much it's changed,
and
right? Yeah.
correct. And kind of traveled with a student to kind of see their experience. We do, bring them in to guest speak So, I think there's avenues that if you can get people just in your school to feel your passion around what you're trying to do, they'll find some ways, to make it work. The medical field, I know that sounds crazy, but it was really hard to get into hospitals for a while.
Yeah.
Uh, so we really had to be unique about that. We're finally, we gained some traction with one of our partners to get some kids in to do like a job shadow. I don't know that they're called candy stripers anymore, but like they go in through a volunteer lens versus, another lens. So, just really who do you have in your community that either has a business or works someplace and knows someone? And just try to cultivate those relationships with the people and find ways for them to come into your school, because if you've got momentum, they'll want to keep helping, and they bring people with them, other partners.
I appreciate, some of the examples you provided, because I think naturally when people hear like business school partnership, they automatically think of some large scale, hugest, largest employer in the county, and it's like, no, like a ma and pop kind of style, somebody that has a purpose and that's willing to work and engage with you.
Yeah.
I think is really the key there. So, um, would you be willing to share just from this journey going way back to 15, 16 when it kind of all started, what were some, if there were any pitfalls or roadblocks that maybe you hit or lessons learned along the way that maybe you would have done them different, maybe you wouldn't have, maybe it was important to kind of go through that process the way it laid out? Is there anything that occurred like that?
Um, I think involvement of all stakeholder groups is key. We hired a new high school principal in the planning. So, getting that person up to speed was important. And continuing teacher voice. So like our academy names and acronyms, teachers created that. So just getting teacher voice, throughout the process was key. I think another thing that we learned, so now Fort NGL, of course, they've learned, they're 10 years later in the process. So they have a much more scripted kind of master planning, kind of components. We didn't have that going in. So it really was choose your own adventure. And sometimes we didn't choose necessarily the most efficient route. But we've eventually got there. I think whether you call it a portrait of a graduate or profile of a graduate, I think that has to be your North Star. And starting out, it wasn't. It was a poster. We had created it with little partners. It was a small team who we felt had the voice of everyone, but it really didn't. So it really became stagnant. So when we revamped that, we made sure to include our business partners from the get-go. And our ninth grade team really stepped up to lead that. We've got the bookends. Ninth grade does a great job. 12th grade does a great job of that work. But how do we embed that work in 11th and 12th grade? We're moving to a K-12 academy kind of mindset.
Okay.
We're in the middle school, and the profile work, we started better with that. Like every teacher knows what the strengths are. Every teacher, kind of leans into that. When we have academy connected activities, kids reflect on, what was, how did you collaborate in this project? Or, how was communication? How did you show leadership? So, a piece of advice, if you're going to do any kind of transformation, have that North Star and embed it in the work throughout. And the teachers need to understand the language, and not just be a poster on a wall. And again, Fort NGL now has one of their tactic teams as the profile or portrait of a graduate. So you immediately embed all of those, kind of improvement plans and different things with that. So teacher voice, I think, is key. And again, for us, the North Star of the profile is important. I wish we would have done that differently at the high school.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. I'm sure others appreciate hearing that, as well. Um, I know I've got to get you back to doing important things here, so I just would like to end on if someone's listening and they are thinking, "Man, this is exactly what I think our school community needs." What is one or two kind of first steps that you would have them take to maybe begin this journey?
Well, I'm a little biased, but I think the work with Ford Next Generation Learning is helpful. They have a roadmap. They're in many different communities. They're international. They had some communities in Scotland. I think their roadmap is really helpful because they've learned from their work and they've improved from their work. But if that's not possible, to partner with them, I think you need a core team that is inclusive of all those stakeholders, right? If you want to do this by yourself, I just don't see how it could be as effective as it could be, with partners, whether they be, post-secondary partners, business partners, parents. When we first started, we had some parents, "You're not going to vocationalize my student." Well, that's not what we're doing. We're giving them opportunities to do things. They're still going to get their Michigan Merit curriculum. So parents, student voice. I still remember a high school kid, as we were working on, the initial master planning process, talked about, I can get a D in science and I have the same diploma as that kid that worked his butt off and has the A. And I was like, whoa. That mindset of a student that, like, it doesn't matter what my grades are because I still have that high school diploma and I don't necessarily want to go to college, right?
Yep.
So how are you helping me in my career path? And so that was kind of a wake-up call to, like, the students, like, this is what I need from school. I don't need science.
Yeah.
can get a D and get my diploma. Like, how are you helping me in what I want to study? So again, having all those stakeholders at the table, having a plan or at least a roadmap to follow. I think we started also with great CTE programs and we had to add a few. We also had to stop a few.
Okay.
Like we stopped autos. Some of that was enrollment and some of that was when we looked at some of our partnerships and pathways, that wasn't necessarily one of those high skill, high wage jobs within our community. We had some other kind of advanced manufacturing and CNC, kind of classes and construction. So we had some hands-on classes. So we didn't build an auto shop at the, new kind of comprehensive high school. You have to be willing to let go of some things. And you have to be willing to listen to the people that you bring to the table. You could also start small with a pocket academy. Don't feel you have to go wall to wall initially. Focus on one area. I know a STEM pocket academy, or I think one of our community, kind of schools in Macomb County has a health, kind of pocket academy. That's with some kids and some teachers, but if you're anxious, that could be a pathway, to start, or ninth grade.
Yeah.
Like ninth grade academy is, that's quite possible.
Yeah.
Because of consistent kind of coursework that most kids, are going to kind of be in.
Yeah.
The thing was to getting teachers on board, giving them a voice of what academy they were in and not just plucking them places. That was important. Like, bless those people that want to work with ninth graders.
Yep.
They chose it.
Yep.
Now like new people, they just get put places. But when we first started it, teachers they were the key in investing and really working this model and plan. So don't 2015, 16. So this is right. This is year 10. And we're just starting to see some fruits of our labor in some areas. Right. So, don't get overwhelmed and start somewhere. Start somewhere.
Absolutely. Great advice. Awesome. Well, Jennifer, I really appreciate your time. I know you guys have a lot of this information. I think it's on like the district website and whatnot. I'm sure people can reach out if they have some questions or maybe want to pick your brain some more. So
Yeah.
appreciate your time today, and looking forward to seeing how you guys continue to support and kind of personalize learning for students. And hopefully there's a lot of buzz around this concept, I feel like, and I like there's some momentum. And so hopefully we'll see additional initiatives like this kind of take hold across the state, because it sounds like it's a great thing for, as you mentioned, everybody, not students
Yeah.
and teachers and parents and local community organizations and businesses. So awesome. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for listening to the MASSP podcast. Remember, you can listen to this podcast and others anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Just search for MASSP or hit the subscribe button right now.